Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. Proficient in dressing up as God and playing the devil? Can invite supernatural beings forward to assist them in battle. Qin Mu was slightly stunned and he suddenly thought of Soul Guide and Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command. These two spells were spells that were related to souls and supernatural beings which were found by him on the first level of floor of heavenly records. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command was from Great Mountain Sect, and as for Soul Guide, it was from Nine Spectres Sect. These two spells were placed in the first level of floor of heavenly records because there were lesser people who would cultivate spells that deviated from the average. They were spells that belonged to the soul category, yet they didn't have much offensive power. Especially for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command, this spell declared that it could dispatch ghost gods, yet when Qin Mu tried it a few times, it was at the most similar to the 5 ghosts transfer technique. However, it was much complicated. When Qin Mu found these two spells, he had once made Chancellor Ba Shan give him pointers. However, Chancellor Ba Shan also despised these two unpopular spells and didn't study them before, therefore he had thrown them back to him and told him to comprehend them himself. Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command might be similar to 5 Ghosts Transfer technique, but the runes were obviously much more complicated and required one to refine a talisman treasure. This talisman treasure was much more complicated than the one Qin Mu saw in Roland's Golden Palace. It was a completely different sphere and had 1024 irregular surfaces. On each surface had a complicated rune. Meanwhile, Roland's Golden Palace's talisman treasure only had 14 surfaces. It was exactly because Qin Mu saw the runes in Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command being complicated, he had thought this divine art was very powerful. Never did he expect its effect was only equivalent to 5 Ghosts Transfer technique. He felt that Great Mountain Sect might have somewhat concealed the technique, however, this sect had vanished from this world and no longer existed. Meanwhile, Qin Mu had also cultivated Soul Guide from Nine Spectres Sect, but he had not tried out if he could succeed in guiding the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. The two spells had some runes that were similar and both of them should be spells related to the soul category. Qin Mu bought some yellow joss paper, cinnabar, and spent 2 days to create talisman treasure for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command before spending another day to write down the runes needed for Soul Guide as well, comparing the both together. Comparing them with each other, Qin Mu finally could confirm that both Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command had mistakes. There were some runes among them that were purposely written wrongly. These sects were not willing to hand the spells of their own sects to the imperial court, therefore, they had purposely written a few runes wrongly, lowering the power of the spell drastically or even making it unusable. The runes for Ghost Transferring God Dispatching Runes command needed an extremely high amount of runes, so even when there were over a dozen mistakes, there were still over 1,000 correct runes. This was a huge treasure vault of knowledge. With this knowledge, Qin Mu could fix the wrong runes in Soul Guide. There were over 600 types of rune arrangements the Soul Guide required, and Qin Mu fixed the wrong runes that he had spotted. When he found that there was no mistake anymore, he immediately called a soldier over to ask, "There are corpses in the city. I would like to test my spell." That soldier asked, "Lord requires the corpses of 9 Spectres Sect to test your spell?" The corpses of 9 Spectres Sect were all buried, so if you need them, they'll have to be dug up. Qin Mu's face changed slightly and hurriedly asked, "Where were they buried?" That soldier replied, "We buried some in the disorderly burial mounds beside Riverside County and the others were buried in Deer Mountain beside Deer County. We just buried the corpses that we fished out a few days ago at wherever that was close." Qin Mu's mind pounded and he hurriedly said, "Where's the young magistrate?" Quickly inform the young magistrate and let her order the whole army to be on guard before sending soldiers to the disorderly burial mounds and Deer Mountain to burn the corpses. The soldier didn't understand what he meant, but he still ran out in a hurry while shouting, "Young magistrate had gone over to Riverside County at the opposite shore to suit the people. I'll head over right now to inform her. Big Sister Chuyu is at Riverside County? This is bad." Qin Mu summoned another soldier over and told him to inform the guards to be on alert before immediately finding Chen Wanyun, Yu Qinghong and the rest, and told them quickly, 9 Spectres Sect might be making a comeback, quickly be on alert. Chen Wanyun, Yu Qinghong, and the rest were all beyond bewildered. Monk Yun Q asked, the people of Nine Spectres sect are almost all eradicated and only a few people are left escaping for their lives. Why do we have to guard against these few people? They are faking their death. Just as Qin Mu said that, suddenly, a faint singing came from the river surface. This singing voice sounded ancient and obscure, as if it was a god of the netherworld summoning the souls of the dead back. It gave people the feeling that a hazy and imposing god had opened the gate to the other world, sending the souls of the dead back from the netherworld. Qin Mu's face changed hugely and his footsteps sprinted like he was flying as he broke through the air, landing on the north gate of the city tower. The north gate of the city was empty and there were only a few soldiers patrolling. Lishu Prefecture's huge army had just experienced a huge battle, therefore, most of them were nursing themselves. Qin Mu looked towards the river surface and only saw a daoist with a straw hat standing on a ship's mast in the center of surging river. He was currently casting spells and singing on the river, and a huge rune gave off a green glow as if there were numerous green snakes wiggling in the sky. Yun Q and the rest came running over and stood beside Qin Mu to look towards the river surface. Chen Wanyun asked, "What is happening?" Before he could even finish his words, he fell into a daze when he saw black fog surging over from the river. The area which the black fog had shrouded became larger and larger, wider and wider. Among the darkness, a towering gate could be seen at the heart of the river, floating above the water. In the blink of an eye, the sky turned dark. Qin Mu looked towards the opposite shore and could faintly see a few ships that were ferrying the scholars sailed over. He then saw the darkness shrouded the scholars' ships. There was also a scholar's ship which had reached the sky above surging river, which was also shrouded by the darkness. Shouts of anger and cries of astonishment sounded out from the ship, making it obvious they had met something unexpected weird. He turned his head towards Deer Mountain on the left of Riverside County. Riverside County suddenly burst open as small figures rushed into the mid-air, pouncing towards their location. The few soldiers who were guarding the west city gate of Deer County couldn't react in time and were fixed in place by the yellow talismans used from the few figures that came flying over, slaughtering them on the spot. Boom! The west city gate blew wide open and the corpses rushed into the county city, slaughtering the guards who had yet reorganized themselves. These corpses were indeed corpses, but the corpses still had the souls of the dead. The daoist on the river cast a spell and used Soul Guide to summon the souls of all the dead people in Nine Spectres sect, allow their souls to return to their body and commence a sudden attack on the guards of Deer County. These corpses were all worn out. There were some that only had a piece of skin attaching their heads to their bodies, while some had a huge hole opened up in their chests. Some were missing their limbs and they all looked terrifyingly sinister. They were indeed dead, but their souls were pulled back from the netherworld and returned to their bodies, thus their abilities were still the same as if they were alive. Even Chen Wanyun was stunned at this sight as he stood on the city tower not knowing what to do. Qin Mu looked towards Riverside County on the opposite shore, which was already shrouded by the black fog. Only the explosions of divine arts could be faintly heard. "Abandon the city, we'll head to the east gate." Qin Mu made his decision. Chen Wanyun and the rest jolted back to their senses and Qin Mu sprinted along the city walls while shouting for the dragon Chelin and Hulinga to return. Turmoil had already broken out in Deer County City as everyone was caught unprepared and got killed by those corpses that were revived by Nine Spectres sect. The Army of Eternal Peace Empire was used to cultivate skills of combined assault. By cultivating the same spell or sword skill, 10 or more soldiers would just need to group up and work together closely for them to be able to even kill opponents a realm higher than them. These kind of battle techniques were extremely useful in a large-scale battle, which could be said that killing enemies was as easy as smashing rotten wood, resulting in an utter defeat for the sects which dared to resist. However, this battle in Deer County City also exhibited the disadvantages of this battle technique. Nine Spectres sect revived corpses to slaughter their way in the city, scattering these soldiers before they could organize themselves. Fighting on their own, the ability of these soldiers was much inferior to the disciples of the sects in the martial world, thus it was almost a one-sided massacre. The sky turned darker and darker. After these disciples of Nine Spectres sect were revived, the darkness was like daylight to them. They could see everything clearly and they were not afraid of death. They were originally corpses, thus they couldn't feel any pain and had no need to defend against the opponent's move. They could just pounce over and kill people directly. Furthermore, Nine Spectres sect as a sect, there was no lack of experts. Even the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm and Life and Death Realm were also revived. This kind of reviving wasn't a real reviving and was just using spells to summon the souls of the dead back. These souls of the dead would still have to return to Netherworld, but in this period of time, it was enough for them to sweep away all the guards in Deer County. The guards of Deer County are finished. Qin Mu's heart sunken when he saw Hu Linger and the dragon Chelene rushing over, only then did he let out a sigh of relief. Everyone immediately jumped off the East City Gate and ran away from the city in the darkness. Behind, the East City Gate suddenly collapsed as it got shattered into pieces by the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm. Qin Mu turned his head to look back and saw a general of Celestial Being Realm being torn apart by a few strong practitioners of Nine Spectres sect that got revived. There were still a few Taoists that were executing the yellow joss papers and walking in the sky. This made Qin Mu's heart sink. These few Taoists were the remnants of Corpse Immortal Cult. With the alliance of Corpse Immortal Cult and Nine Spectres sect, one of them would control corpses while the other would control souls. There probably wouldn't be much soldiers in the city left. Academician Qin, we should cross the river and return to Riverside County, Chen Wanyun said solemnly. Qin Mu shook his head. There are also quite a lot of corpses sunk in the river. We can't return. Just as he said that, sounds of water traveled over from the riverside. Among the black-colored fog, the revived corpses walked ashore from the bottom of the river with water dripping off their bodies. When they saw them, they suddenly sprinted towards here. We can only head to southern borders and look for the chance to return to the north. Qin Mu had no change in expression as he raised his hand to pat his waist. A sword light flew out from Tautier's sack and transformed into wave sword form. With the sword light revolving, it severed the heads of the Nine Spectres sect's disciples. The few Nine Spectres sect's disciples became headless zombies. They immediately bent over and picked up their heads, clasping them under their armpits and continued to rush over. A head under the armpit of the corpse opened his mouth and shouted with a sharp voice, "Come quickly, there are some that have slipped through the net. Come quickly." Even though Yun Qiu, Yu Qinghong, and Chen Wanyun were quite knowledgeable and seen a lot, they had never seen such a sinister spell before. On the other hand, Cai Yunxiang, who was always shy and timid, was calm and composed. She was not the slightest afraid. Qin Mu spread his 5 fingers and gave a sudden squeeze. The sword light of Junior Protector Sword immediately turned into spiral sword form. The sword spun and sliced the disciples of Nine Spectres sect into pieces as he warned solemnly, "Move quickly, in case the experts of Nine Spectres sect catches up." The few of them quickly sprinted towards the darkness. Yun Qiu looked at the flames surrounding Deer County and felt slight fear and dismal in his heart. To the southern borders? That's the nest of the enemies. The black fog grew denser and denser. It was daytime, yet it looked like the night. Qin Mu and the rest could still roughly determine the direction. When they raised their heads up to the sky, they could still see the sun, but the sun wasn't harsh to their eyes. It was like a faint circular halo that was much dimmer than the moonlight. Looking around their surrounding, they could only see the green mountain turning into a hazy black mountain. Noisy voices came from behind as someone shouted, "There are a few that escaped. There are 3 males and 3 females, and also a huge lion. Don't go away, pick up my head. Come back quickly." Qin Mu's heart moved slightly and he looked towards Chen Wanyun. Chen Wanyun understood his intention and his flying sword flew out of his sheath to dig a long hole in the ground for him to lie down. It was the first time he had met such a weird incident of the dead reviving, therefore, he was slightly at a loss, but now he had already calmed down. Qin Mu waved his sleeves and swept up the earth on both sides, burying Chen Wanyun under the earth. The rest of them continued walking forward and they didn't move much further when they heard miserable shrieks coming from their back. "Someone hid in the earth to ambush us. My head is severed, does anyone see my head?" "Shut up, idiot. If your head is missing, how are you talking?" "So I see. No wonder I couldn't find it for so long. Which senior brother saw my leg?" Sorry to trouble you, much thanks. Qin Mu made the dragon Qilin stop and Chen Wangyun immediately caught up. There shouldn't be any more pursuers. Let us go quickly. Suddenly, singing voices faintly sounded out from the fog, and these songs were even more peculiar than the song coming from the river surface. These songs had no cadence and sounded very monotonous. Qin Mu made them stop for a moment while he sneaked over and saw the few singers that were singing. They were a few corpses, singing and casting spells, executing soul guide in the dark forest. Their bodies were tattered and they looked very strange, casting spells in the darkness. Dead people casting spells? Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He suddenly thought of the divine art of Nine Spectres sect and felt that they had the flavor of breaking through the boundary of life and death. If this kind of divine art was researched to its limit, could it break the boundary between life and death and achieve eternal life? The divine arts of Nine Spectres sect were far from being called eternal life now. They were only guiding the souls of the dead back from the netherworld, to allow the souls to reside in their own bodies temporarily. They had to continue to execute soul guide, and if they stopped executing soul guide, their souls might probably be dragged back to the netherworld and they would really die. No wonder those corpses are also executing soul guide. Qin Mu thought to himself, they must execute soul guide continuously for them to be able to continue moving. These dead men are not weak in cultivation, therefore, it's still best to avoid them. He left these dead people alone and sneaked back. Let us change a direction. They didn't move much further when they met another group of Nine Spectres sect's disciples that were casting spells. Other than these Nine Spectres sect's disciples that were already dead, he also saw a few disciples of Corpse Immortal cult that were also controlling corpses to surround the soldiers that were escaping from the city. The flying zombies flew by, walking on the yellow joss papers beneath their feet. Qin Mu frowned and changed another direction. Let us head to Deer Mountain. The corpses of Nine Spectres sect were buried there and they slaughtered their way to the county city from there, therefore it must be empty over there. Everyone was extremely nervous as the people of Nine Spectres sect and Corpse Immortal cult were now everywhere in the black fog. Since Corpse Immortal cult was eradicated by Yu and Chuyu, he reckoned the cult disciples' corpses were also buried nearby, allowing Nine Spectres sect to revive them as well. It was obvious that Nine Spectres sect had come prepared, catching Yu and Chuyu off guard. If this situation went on, Liz Hu would probably be in danger. Qin Mu thought to himself, there must definitely be a ruthless fellow behind the scenes in Nine Spectres sect. For victory, he could even sacrifice the lives of so many disciples of Nine Spectres sect unscrupulously. They came to Deer Mountain and there was indeed no one here. The black fog had also faded quite a bit. Chen Wangyun, Yun Qiu and the rest gradually put their hearts down. As long as they crossed this mountain and left the area shrouded by the black fog, they would be temporarily safe. Suddenly, a cadence chant sounded from the mountain. Everyone's heart turned anxious again and they looked towards Qin Mu. Qin Mu frowned slightly and whispered, something's wrong with his chanting. This isn't soul guide and is another kind of spell. Yu Qinghong and the rest couldn't hear the difference. They didn't know much about soul guide of Nine Spectres sect while Qin Mu had studied this divine art before, thus he could hear some disparity from the chants. You guys stay here, I'll go and have a look. Qin Mu instructed them and approached the chanting silently. When he came near to the chantings, Qin Mu's footsteps became even softer. On the mountain col in front of him, he could see a sacrificial altar and there were over 10 male and female Taoists casting spells on the sacrificial altar. That sacrificial altar was constructed by skeletons. The length and width were the same, each being 13 yards long. Meanwhile, on the altar, skulls were used to create a flat surface. With a wide banner erected at the four corners, north, south, east, west. Runes written in cinnabar mixed with blood were on the white banners. A sculpture of an 8-armed devil god was erected on the center of the sacrificial altar. This sculpture squatted with one single leg while the other leg wrapped the previous one around the back of its calf. With the palms of the 8 arms clasped together, the devil god had 4 faces and each face had 3 eyes. These male and female Taoists each executed a talisman treasure and the talisman treasures floated in the air. The talisman had numerous surfaces and on each surface was a rune. With these Taoists chant, the runes on the talisman treasures lighted up continuously. The runes that lighted up shone precisely on the body of the devil god's sculpture. Whenever a place got shone on, a rune would light up on the devil god's sculpture. The talisman treasure continuously spun and lighted up the runes on the sculpture one after another. At this moment, more than half of the runes on this devil god's sculpture had been lighted up. Ghost transferring god dispatching runes command. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. The spells of Great Mountain Sect. They are the disciples of Great Mountain Sect which was already exterminated. These dozen male and female Taoists were all divine arts practitioners, and it looked like that they had already been executing ghost transferring god dispatching runes command for quite some time. It was obvious that after Great Mountain Sect was exterminated, they had conspired to strike back, allying themselves with Nine Spectres Sect and Corpse Immortal Cult. Qin Mu then took the time which Nine Spectres Sect rose up in revolt into consideration and found it was precisely the time when the scholars of Imperial College were just arriving at Lishu and Deer County. This meant that there was someone who had clearly kept tabs on the movement of the scholars of Imperial College and even the time the Imperial scholars would reach here. The scholars of Imperial College coming out for experience were all elites chosen from their own realms. These scholars would become the future officials of Eternal Peace Empire, taking over the current batch of officials that had come from each and every sect. The current officials mostly belonged to the older generation, while the Imperial scholars were the new generation. If this batch of scholars was to be entirely eradicated, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would lose a pillar of strength in his new generation. This time the scholars coming out for experience was a decree by the Emperor, and those who knew this beforehand would only be the first-ranking high officials who held high authority other than Ji Linwan. Qin Mu's gaze flickered. Among the first-ranking powerful ministers, there were definitely people who had betrayed. He very much wanted to continue watching how these disciples of Great Mountain Sect summoned the Devil God, but if he waited until the Devil God was summoned, their deaths would probably be due. Qin Mu sneaked back silently and described what he had seen to Chen Wanyun and the rest, 13 divine arts practitioners, and their abilities aren't weak. If they bring out the Devil God, none of us will be able to escape. We'll have to eliminate them before they bring out the Devil God and destroy the sacrificial altar. Who dares to follow me to kill them? Kill divine arts practitioners? Yun Qiu and Yu Qinghong were both astonished, and 13 of them. Qin Mu gave them a glance. You guys don't dare. Yun Qiu muttered, I felt a little afraid. They are divine arts practitioners, and furthermore, there are 13 of them. Qin Mu replied solemnly, if we don't kill them, when they bring out the Devil God, not only will we die, the entire Lishu would be destroyed. Chen Wanyun muttered to himself irresolutely and asked, is Great Mountain Sect a spell sect? Cai Yunxiang tightened the sword case on her back and said, I've heard my elders mention before that Great Mountain Sect was a sect that was proficient in cultivating spells related to souls. They aren't as proficient in sword skills or battle techniques. Back then, when Imperial Preceptor exterminated Great Mountain Sect, he brought a team of divine arts practitioners that cultivated sword skill to attack Great Mountain, exterminating this sect. After Great Mountain Sect got exterminated, their disciples that were scattered outside might not learn the traditional spells and won't have many attainments in their battle techniques and sword skills. Qin Mu said, Imperial Preceptor used sword skills to kill them, but we won't use sword skills, we'll use battle techniques. If we use sword skills, we won't win their spells. But in close combat, before they could even execute their spells, they would be slain by us. Wanyun, Yun Qiu, Qinghong, I've seen your battle techniques before and they aren't weak. Do you have the guts to face them? Chen Wanyun replied solemnly, you dare, I dare. Qin Mu looked at Cai Yunxiang, and Cai Yunxiang lowered her head while saying, Yunxiang will take Imperial Academician as my only guide. Qin Mu then looked at Yu Qinghong, and her eyes were sparkling as she found it hard to suppress her excitement. I had never come to grips with such a situation before. How can I not participate? Wolf Slave, get ready as well. Qin Mu's gaze fell on Monk Yun Qiu, and he hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth. If I don't enter hell, who would? I'm in. Qin Mu said, I will be the first to rush out later and slaughter my way up to the sacrificial altar to pave the way for you guys. You guys will follow behind me and fight in close combat. We'll have to fight as quick as possible and cannot drag the battle out. The sacrificial is only 13 by 13 yards. With such cramped space, You guys will have to think what move you want to use and go through it several times in your mind. Yu Qinghong was so excited both her hands were trembling as she smiled. Following you isn't so bad after all. The first battle is already so exciting, I already can't wait. Qin Mu stooped down and moved forward. Chen Wanyan and the rest followed him and came to the mountain kernel. They could see that the runes on the body of Devil God's sculpture were almost all lit up. The 13 female and male Taoists were still executing their talisman as they continued walking around the sacrificial altar. The chants came out continuously from their mouth as if it was an ancient sacrificial language. Qin Mu's heart jumped and he suppressed his urge to immediately rush out and break the sacrificial ritual. He instructed softly, "Observe the terrain and after you guys are done, we'll make our move. Linger, bring the dragon Qilin to the other side and make some sounds to attract their attention." Hu Linger immediately brought the dragon Qilin to take a detour around the sacrificial altar and went towards the right. After a moment, Yu Qinghong said softly, "We are done observing." Qin Mu waved his hand and Hu Linger immediately jumped out from the underbrush while the dragon Qilin roared behind her and gave chase as if he was hunting. The 13 Taoists on the sacrificial altar were astonished, but when they saw the fox and the dragon Qilin, the Taoist smiled, so it was a huge lion catching its prey. Before he could even finish his words, he saw a knife light flashed by. Qin Mu had already arrived at the sacrificial altar with each hand wielding a knife. The human head rolled down as he raised his hand. Battle technique, every cloud has a silver lining. On this sacrificial altar that knot was very large, a vertical and a horizontal knife light shone. The horizontal knife light beheaded the Taoist while the vertical knife light sliced down from the head of another female Taoist. That female Taoist was a divine arts practitioner of Six Directions realm, and even though she had never cultivated battle techniques before, she had a golden chain hanging around her forehead, and in the middle of this chain was a jewel. Light burst forth from this jewel and blocked this knife from Qin Mu. Qin Mu dragged his knife and the female Taoist's forehead bled. Her vital qi immediately burst forth and the horsetail whisk in her other hand bloomed like a flower that had countless petals. The thousands of threads from the horsetail whisk stabbed towards Qin Mu. Her attacks just unleashed and she saw countless of sword light overwhelming her. Midnight battle across stormy cities. Qin Mu's footsteps moved and he avoided the horsetail whisk that was stabbing towards him and went behind the female Taoist's corpse, which had not collapsed to the ground yet. Behind that female Taoist's corpse, there was a Taoist behind her. That Taoist had already returned to his senses and yellow joss papers flew out from the pouch on his waist. However, at this moment, Qin Mu threw away his knives and jabbed with his fingers, putting together. The vital qi at his fingertips turned into incomparably sharp sword light and penetrated through the heart of that Taoist's brows. Behind Qin Mu, a dragon and an elephant rose into the sky. The dragon coiled around Yun Q as he stepped on the elephant and slaughtered towards a female Taoist. A loud boom sounded out as he smashed the female Taoist onto the sculpture of the devil god. That female Taoist spat out blood and her vital qi burst forth, reflecting him away. She was about to kill him when a sword light flashed by and smeared her throat, giving off a soft clink sound. This female Taoist's vital qi was so dense that she actually used her vital qi to block this sword. However, in the next moment, Chen Wanyan appeared beside her and grabbed the sword's hilt. With all his strength, he actually pushed her onto the devil god's sculpture and pulled out his sword forcefully, bursting forth with blood light. Wolf Slave's body flashed and he leaped onto the head of the sculpture. With two of his devil knives appearing and disappearing unpredictably, he hacked downwards. Meanwhile, Yu Qinghong stood on the shoulders of Wolf Slave and sharp swords flew out from the sword case on her back, turning into drill sword form as she stabbed towards a Taoist below. That Taoist grabbed a white banner stabbed on the altar and held the banner in a reverse grip. The white banner trembled and the runes on the banner lighted up and swam out like weird red snakes to block the two devil knives. Meanwhile, Yu Qinghong's drill sword form drilled through the banner and tunneled into the heart of his brows. At the same time, Cai Yinxiang flashed past like a phantom and gave repeated blows with a kind of strange mudra, vibrating another female Taoist to death, shattering all her bones. Chen Wanyan's heart leaped when he saw this. Junior sister Cai hid her abilities well, her cultivation is extremely powerful. he leaped towards another Daoist, and the Daoist suddenly jumped down from the altar to run away. Behind him, the yellow joss paper flew towards the sacrificial altar. Chen Wanyan immediately gave chase, but the yellow joss papers exploded one after another, blowing him away ruthlessly. At the other side, Qin Mu moved to block that Daoist, executing Great 5 platform mudra to block that Daoist's way. That Daoist sneered and splayed out his 5 fingers. Thunder burst forth from the heart of his palm and shook Qin's soul. That Daoist put his mind at rest and shouted sternly, "A bunch of younger generation that hasn't even cultivated to 6 fusion realm actually." Just as he said that, he felt a chill from the back of his heart and he lowered his head to see a sword piercing through his chest. He had totally no idea when that person behind him had closed in on him. Qin Mu pulled out his sword and the person croaked, "Great body technique." When he finished saying that, he collapsed to the ground and stopped breathing. Qin Mu returned his sword into the sheath, and on the altar, Yu Qinghong, Wolf Slave, and Sai Yunxiang were still killing the other Daoist. They circled the altar and saw corpses surrounding the devil god sculpture. Some Daoists were not collapsed on the floor and were nailed to the devil god sculpture. Some of the Daoists were hung on the white banner and some were turned into a pile of mush. Some of their heads were smashed by an iron hammer and they all died differently. The 3 of them were shaken and Sai Yunxiang inspected the corpses with a grave expression. These corpses had all suffered Qin Mu's ruthless attack in an instant and died before they could even unleash their divine arts. They all basically died from just one move, she thought to herself secretly and raised her eyes to look at Qin Mu. 13 divine arts practitioners, even though their battle techniques weren't strong, divine arts practitioners were divine arts practitioners after all. Even though everyone said that it was sure death if a strong practitioner of the spell school was to be closed in by strong practitioners of the battle technique school, those were only casual talk. If there was a difference in realm, battle techniques might not be able to break through the opponent's defensive divine arts. Even though they had caught the enemies unprepared, Qin Mu's battle prowess was way too strong, his speed was also way too fast. Qin Mu trembled his junior protector sword and shook off the blood on his sword. Returning the sword into his sheath, he said, "Clean the battlefield and immediately destroy the devil god sculpture." Just as he had said that, a loud boom suddenly came from not far away. Bloodlight shone among the black fog, dyeing the pitch-black fog blood red. That bloodlight was over 300 yards high and they could even see it clearly while standing at the mountain col. A terrifying power came surging from another world and pounded at where the bloodlight had burst forth from. Following that, rumblings of thunder sounded out as bolts of lightning struck around the surroundings of the bloodlight. That was the bolts of lightning compressed out from the space by the terrifying power. If the power was too strong, the vibrating force would compress the space and cause the space to become unstable. When space became unstable, the lightning hidden in the space would burst forth. Everyone's expression turned into a daze as they saw an incomparably huge body gradually standing up at where the bloodlight and bolts of lightning were gathering at. That was a devil god with horns on his head and have 4 arms and 4 legs. Even though it was only a sculpture, towering flames overflowed from his body as if a devil god had descended into this world. This devil god that had descended was even taller than this deer mountain, and with smoke billowing out from its body, there were flames and rays of lightning mixed with the smoke. Meanwhile, the bloodlight soared into the sky and hung above his head. There was another place where the great mountain sect was summoning another devil. Qin Mu's limbs turned icy cold. On the other side, the divine arts practitioners of Great Mountain sect had succeeded in casting their spell and summoned the devil god over. The gaze of that imposing devil god was like bolts of lightning interweaving each other. Wherever the gaze swept by, all the trees and rocks would be completely reduced to ashes with a fizzle. Qin Mu let out a murky breath and said in a low voice, "Strip." Everyone was slightly stunned and Monk Yun muttered, "I have to undress again." Sai Yunxiang understood what he meant and immediately undressed the clothes from the corpse on the ground. The other people also immediately understood Qin Mu's meaning and hurriedly took off the clothes of Great Mountain sect's divine arts practitioners. Qin Mu also wore the clothes of the Great Mountain sect's disciple while instructing with a low voice, "Pluck out those white banners and pick up the talisman treasures as backup." Chen Wanyan and the rest went forward to pluck out the white banner and pick up the talisman treasure. When they were all ready, they saw the devil god blustering towards the river surface, tremoring the huge waves of surging river into the sky. Everyone's expression changed hugely, and the dragon Qin had also rushed over. Qin Mu said quickly, "We need to move away from here immediately. This place is no longer for us, scholars of Five Elements realm, to have a footing. Are there any items on you that could represent you as an imperial scholar? Hand them all to me." Unq took out his pass and book tablet while muttering, "Are we really going to send ourselves to death going to the southern border?" Qin Mu kept everyone's passes and book tablets into his Taotia sack and said, "We are going to take a detour from the southern border. After we make it through this battlefield, we'll just have to cross the river and we'll be safe once we reach the north of the river." He let out a murky breath and was about to order them to move off when he took a glance at the devil god sculpture which was yet completed. His heart wavered and he carried this sculpture up, tying it on the dragon Qilin's back. "Let's go to the south." Everyone was in a heavy mood as they followed him and headed toward the south along the foothills. After about 3 to 4 miles, they had finally walked out of the area shrouded by the black fog. Walking another 3 to 4 miles ahead, Qin Mu turned his head back and saw the black fog was like an incomparably huge black wak which was covered on the surroundings of surging river, detaining both sides of the shores. In the middle of the black fog was an enormous gate which opened access between life and death, connecting to the gate in the netherworld. "I wonder how many people would survive in Lishu," Qin Mu thought to himself. Not long after, Qin Mu suddenly stopped. "The army is here." Unq was delighted. "Army? Our eternal peace's army?" Qin Mu shook his head and pointed forward. "The rebel army." Everyone looked forward and there were dozens of ships flying towards them. The gunfanons were brandished on the ships, and around each and every ship were strange beasts that were flying in the sky. There were strange beasts of shapes and sizes, having a numerous number of species. Meanwhile, below the army in the sky, there were rows of soldiers that were made up by martial arts practitioners and divine arts practitioners. Among the soldiers, there were huge beasts that were strapped full with huge circular rocks. These beasts were dozens of yards tall and was like moving mountains. With every step they took, the ground trembled endlessly. Qin Mu and the rest stood at one side and let this huge army that was heading towards the battlefield at Surging River to pass. A general standing on one of the ships shot his lightning-like gaze over and swept Qin Mu and the rest before inquiring the officer beside him, "Who are those people?" The officer beside him gave Qin Mu and the rest a few glances and said, "They seem to be disciples of Great Mountain Sect. I'll head down to ask them." This general leaped down from the ship, and every time his feet landed, there would be a golden lotus blooming under his feet. With a lotus blooming with each footstep, he walked over to Qin Mu and the rest step by step, making everyone felt fear and trepidation in the face of disaster. This was a great expert of 7 stars realm which could step on the void. If he wanted to kill them, it was as easy as blowing away a speck of dust. That officer saw the devil god sculpture on the dragon Qilin's back and asked coldly, "Disciples of Great Mountain Sect, running without a fight, how should you be punished?" Qin Mu bowed and replied in a neither servile nor overbearing tone, "Our Great Mountain Sect has tried our best. We have already summoned out a devil god to assist in the battle. Not only are we not guilty, we've done a meritorious deed instead." That officer gave a cold snort. "However, you've escaped from the battle. This is a crime punishable by death, to be beheaded on the spot." Qin Mu had an expression of grief and indignation as he protested, "We suffered from the sneak attack of Lishu, and among my 13 brothers and sisters, 7 of them had died in battle. Only the 6 of us are left. When we are putting our lives on the line, where are your people? Our Great Mountain Sect has already been exterminated and only we're left. Do you really want all of us to die there? General, leave some seeds for our Great Mountain Sect." That general hesitated and raised his head to look up. On the ship in the sky, the general said solemnly, "There are already very little people in Great Mountain Sect, so there's no need to delve into this. They had already done a great deed by summoning one devil god out to assist in the battle. Let them execute their spells to affirm their identity before letting them go." Chen Wanyun, Yun Q, and the rest broke out in cold sweat. They had never cultivated before the spells of Great Mountain Sect. Qin Mu executed a talisman treasure and the general's voice came sounding out, "Not a talisman treasure, spells." Qin Mu's vital chi circulated and his vital chi turned into a rune which shone onto the body of the devil god sculpture, lighting up a rune on the devil god sculpture. That general bowed and said, "General Sherry, this is indeed ghost transferring god dispatching runes command of great mountain sect." General Sherry on the ship waved his hand, "Let them go, move the army and attack Liz Hu." "Halt!" General Sherry's gaze landed on Qin Mu and the rest, a smile curled up on his lips. "Send them to Heaven Wave City and let them summon a devil god there as well. This video will end here.